Hello, ladies, gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Lights Camera Discussion. I'm joined here today by Collective Unit and Todd. Guys, how are we doing today?
Good, mate. How are you?
Not too bad. Todd, yourself?
A lot more awake, a lot more excited
Good.
this time.
Glad to hear it. Finally. Got some coffee down you, feeling raring to go.
Ready to go, yeah.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Right, so today we are discussing the one and only S. Craig Zahler, or if you're American, S. Craig Zahler. We're going to be talking about his films Bone Tomahawk, Brawl and Cell Block 99, and then finally Dragged Across Concrete. Are you guys excited about this one? I think it's going to be an interesting episode. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, very much so. This was my pick for a director for us to cover. So yeah, really looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Todd, thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of difference.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have those love-ins. I think this is going to be one. Not where I don't think there's going to be any bashing necessarily, but I do think there's going to be some different of opinions on this one. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out very soon enough. But before we get into the meat and bones of it, Collie, give us a bit of a background on Mr. Craig Zahler.
Yeah, of course. Stephen Craig Zahler is an American screenwriter, film director, novelist, and composer. Outside of earning his growing reputation as an ambitious auteur with the 3 films we'll be discussing today, Zahler has stated that he has had over 20 screenplays optioned or sold to various studios. He has also authored 7 books, 2 of which have been optioned for adaptation as well. So, very talented guy in terms of, getting his idea on paper and got on screen, and looking forward to discussing maybe, the pros and cons of his style today.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go straight into it then. So first we're going to talk about Bone Tomahawk. So in the dying days of the Old West, an elderly sheriff and his posse set out to rescue their town's doctor from cannibalistic cave dwellers. Right, first thoughts then. Collie, seeing as it was your choice, take us away.
So I first watched this way back when it originally came out, and I've watched it a couple of times since. It kind of shows his style, but also doesn't, because this is the only one that's set, in olden times, so to speak. But there's certain, directorial choices that he's made in this. That he continues through his films. Namely, one of his main things that I want to maybe hear your guys' thoughts on is the lack of score, or when score is utilized. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? But no, love Bone Tomahawk. Absolutely brutal, which I think we'll say about all 3 of his films. But yeah, fantastic.
Todd?
Yeah, so I watched this a few years back. Like, I was late to it. It wasn't something I watched on release or anything. And then haven't watched since. I was drawn in under the guise that it was a horror film. Like, that's what I was sold on. But I love that it's a Western with horror elements. I love how brutal it is. I don't think I'd seen anything like it when I first watched it, in terms of like how in your face some of it is. But in terms of an introduction to Zahler, I think in terms of dialogue and stuff, it's really good. The cast is fantastic, and like obviously we'll get into all that. Yeah, it's one of those that I'll definitely be watching again, and I'll probably get more from every time. What about you, Massey?
Yeah, absolutely. So this again is one that I watched. I think it was not long after it came out, and again it was the whole uniqueness of the fact that it was a horror set in the Western times, or the Wild West kind of thing, that drew me to it as well. And it genuinely is like nothing I've ever seen before. And again, from the first time I watched it, I think I got it the first time I watched it, but I really enjoyed watching it the second time with kind of like almost fresh eyes, and a bit more of like a kind of what's the word? Educated look on it, if that makes sense. Like, as opposed to being just like, oh, horror set in the Wild West. Kind of thinking about the more technical aspects, or like bits and pieces that maybe I didn't catch on first watch, as like a surface level sort of thing. So, it's a very, very interesting, and as you both said, and again, as you say, Collie, brutal film that we're going to be using that sort of language in the other films as well. Okay, so Shall we kind of like talk about then the style that Zahler brings to this sort of thing? As you say, there's things like the score or lack of, or like sort of more interesting uses of the score when we're kind of going through. So I know you mentioned it obviously there, Collie. What about the score or lack of stood out for yourself then?
Yeah, just like the sounds that he was using, like even the opening credits when you hear flies buzzing and stuff like that. You know, quite a lot of films utilize that, but you always be like, oh, maybe we're in for a good time here when that happens. And the opening sequence, it kind of lays out what the film's going to be. It's, you know, for one of the first things that you see is the guy getting his neck cut, and you hear every single bit of it, and the knife on every single bit of that guy's, you know, flesh to windpipe, all that kind of jazz. Like, it's just, this is what we're going to be doing today, is kind of what Zahler's laying out at that point. And then you go all the way through to, and I think I was trying to like specifically listen out for it, but you don't hear any score until they're actually riding out on this search party. And so it's Zahler and his mate Jeff Herriott, who do music outside of films together, but they work together on this and his subsequent films. And Herriott states that he likes to make music to accompany long shots rather than close-ups, and then function as mood setting or establish scenes and make transitions when there was no dialogue. So, you know, Zahler's choice as a director, and you know, when he's trying to utilize sounds and stuff, is that when there's dialogue, there's like no music whatsoever. And music's utilized obviously in so many films, like Nolan and stuff, for emotional flow, I would say, within a scene. Certain lines and then are like kind of got some background swelling of music and all that, whereas Zahler's just straight to the point, dialogue driven, which I think is a really, again, interesting, different approach to it. But in this film and subsequent films, I think it's very effective and works very well. Well, Massey, what did you think on the score when it was used and then when it wasn't used?
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting one, and it's almost like it was almost something that stood out for me without obviously doing anything, because you get kind of used to like the naturalistic sort of as you say, there's just straight up dialogue. There's the sounds are all to do with like what's happening naturally. There's nothing kind of in the background lifting stuff up. To be honest, I don't even know if I clicked that the first time they used the score was that sort of like riding scene out, because I think it all just felt, because I got used to not having a score, having the score there almost underpinned it more, as opposed to being at the front and center and making me think, oh, jolly riding song. I was kind of just more like it fit in with what he was doing, and I think the movie is better, or it adds such a more uniqueness, the fact that it doesn't rely on like manufactured sound as opposed to like the more naturalistic sort of side of stuff, which is such a cool way to do it. It's a whole less is more, I suppose, isn't it? Which I thought was really good. And it's funny you said it because for Nolan there, because that was one of the things that when I clicked that there wasn't really much score, I was like thinking about people that would use score a lot, and obviously Nolan's kind of almost memed at this point the fact that he will have music throughout the whole sort of film, or most of his films, obviously Oppenheimer excluded, of course. And once I kind of tuned into that sort of side of things, it was something that I was really sort of struck by, and really made me think about that sort of side of things. Todd, thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, it was because in previous episodes when we've talked about the score, I've sort of been a little bit like, oh, was it? Like, it sort of takes me by surprise a little bit, where I'm with you on, it was so quiet and so natural, and like you said, the only things that we're hearing are the fairly brutal and like real sounds around us. So when that score kicked in, it made me sit up and, you know, realize a little bit more. I don't think I can cover anything more than you can say. The only thing I would, just while we're on sound in general, is I didn't love the noise that they make, that the troglodytes make. I out of all of this like amazing sound design, where like you say that first bit where they're cutting through that neck, I watched it with headphones on the first time, and I'm like, sorry, the first watch like for this, and I'm pleased I did because it's so heavy, and that the noise that the troglodytes make through that bone or whatever it is, it sounded like something out of a low budget Godzilla. Like it really pissed me off, and it took me out every time. I don't know if it's something that you sort of clocked onto, but yeah, for me it was just weird, like ineffective, and for such a big part of the film, it was like my one gripe with the sound, because again, there's a couple of bits and pieces throughout these films where like sound editing seems to be a big thing for him. Like if you see he does music outside, and like there's a couple of bits and pieces where I'm like, you've let that slip, or like that's and I think that was one of them was that noise. So yeah, I don't know if it was anything that you two picked up on, but it was just something that.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because like for me, like certainly I do think that the troglodytes were scarier when they were just sneaking up and like they came out of nowhere with no sound. That definitely was more effective for me than the kind of it was almost like creature-esque sort of like raptors, wasn't it? You know, like from from Jurassic Park kind of thing. Which I wasn't too fussed by it, to be fair. I kind of liked the building of almost the lore of them, in the like the way that I saw it was that they'd almost evolved, like, or not evolved, but like their actual physiology had changed to have that, because that's also like how they communicated stuff. Because I might be right in saying this, but from what I got from it was that like that bone had obviously grown over years of like inbreeding and things like that, and it wasn't just necessarily like something they put in.
Yeah, I thought it was part of them.
Yeah.
I took it to be that it was like a lip plate or anything like that that you'll see. I thought it was a thing that it was an animal bone or something like that. I took it to be,
because that's kind of,
that they like.
Yeah, because that's what I was torn between the two. I wasn't sure if it was like the sort of evolution side of it, or if it was something. I don't think it was explicit. Well, it wasn't explicit, sad. We've all got different kind of views kind of on it. So yeah, that's interesting. If it is kind of, I prefer to think that it's more like a physiology, inbreeding, evolution-y kind of thing. I think that adds more to the characters. But yeah.
I love that they had it. I thought it was a really cool like way of them communicating and stuff. Like I don't have an issue with the actual lore of it or like whatever. I just wish, even if it was just like a really high pitched sort of scream or something that came out, I don't know, like I'd have just preferred a different noise.
My thoughts on it, when it was off screen, I thought it was a good noise, but when they're actually in the cave at the end, and you know the leader or whatever stands up and does it, it doesn't seem synced into his movements. It seems like you say obviously it's post edited, but like, it doesn't seem on par with the natural noises that you're getting throughout the rest of the film. It definitely, when you see them performing the noise, it took me out of it a little bit every time. I think that would be one fair criticism on it. When they're in the hills, like previously, and they're saying, "What's that noise?" and I heard that noise on the night of, the abductions and stuff. Like that was fine, I thought, because I was like, "Oh, that's obviously them calling to each other." But the one or two instances when you actually physically see them do the noise, it looks a bit hokey. It did look a bit hokey. I would definitely agree on that.
Aye, because the big guy kind of does like a almost stereotypical like big leader monster thing. Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
Kind of, I totally get that. But yeah, I do.
What was the
think...
impression? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to check.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on when you're saying about how hearing it like off screen is kind of more of like a an eerier sort of thing, because it does kind of sound like not natural, but like wind blowing through something, doesn't it? Like it could be like a noise in nature sort of thing that you potentially hear, but
or just purely an animal noise. Yeah, just an animal in the desert at night noise, like coyotes or whatever.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very, very, very good point. I mean, there's again kind of thinking about sound and stuff like that as well. As you said, Todd, about the cutting of the neck and stuff, and you're saying, because Colin, do you watch it with headphones on as well? Did you? I know you normally.
Yeah, I just
don't,
hear him watch it with these on. Yeah.
What was it like for you guys? Because I just watched it on my TV, obviously not headphone stuff, but obviously the one of the big scenes, kind of like later on when they're in the cave with the bisecting of the sheriff. That for me certainly stood out as like a really gory point. But obviously for you guys listening to it with headphones on, what was kind of the reaction when that sort of thing happened?
Well, I mean, it's horrible. Like you're hearing every single slice and cut, and you're hearing his life being begged for by his sheriff and stuff like that. So it's a very disgusting but emotional scene as well, because he's like, "Oh, we'll get them back for you" and stuff as well. And so you're hearing that almost in like one headphone. Is him begging for or telling him that he's going to be avenged, and on the other ear you're hearing the actual guy being cut in half. It's so well utilized, but it's and again he uses it throughout all of his films. Anytime there's any sort of killing or anything like that, like there's no shortcuts taken or kind of covering up with the noise or anything like that. It's like, no, you're getting to hear this and see it. So
yeah.
Todd,
it doesn't. It's not clean either, which is what I loved about it. Like, as in the noise, it wasn't like a slice, because obviously they're using a literal bone tomahawk. It's like it's
not like a.
I want to see I want to see like a replica of this axe, because it looks like it's like obviously like a sharpened bone, and they're just hacking, and it's like you just hear it again. There's other films. There is. One, sorry,
it's horrible. No, I'm just remembering it. It's horrible. Like I'm not massively into horror or anything like that, so like anything like that's just completely out of the norm for me.
There's another horror film that uses like somebody getting chopped in half, and it feels now. I haven't watched it since Bone Tomahawk, but it feels like it was cheap in comparison to Bone Tomahawk, if that makes sense. Where like, Terrifier.
Oh, okay.
Art the Clown. Now that we've said it, it's like this lass is like hung upside down and he uses a saw. And as far as I can remember, it feels cheap in comparison to this, because that Bone Tomahawk makes it feel like that's what it would be like if you had to literally cut somebody in half, especially with an axe made out of bone. Again, I apologize, but it was fantastic. And sorry, while we're on the subject, like the practical side of stuff, like just it feels like a natural sort of segue into it. It's so good to see. And even when we'll get to like later films, I think there was a time where it looked a little bit cheap. I love seeing him be practical and actually, like when Patrick Wilson's character cuts that bone out of the neck, and he has to cut a bit of the sinew off. Like, that was fantastic. Like, I just love seeing it.
It goes on for ages as well. Like, he's trying to cut out and that, and you're just like, fucking hell. It's like just squelching and sawing and cutting and fucking hell. Like, it just like in a good way. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's just like. It will say this probably about all of his films. Is like every single scene, you could probably be like, this could probably be about a minute shorter than it needs to, or like, but he just lets everything breathe, though. You know, and we'll comment, especially probably on his third film, whether that's effectual or not. But I think that's one thing I like about him. Really, is that there's no, this is the scene, this is the scene. There's no rushing of anything, especially in this film, because we're talking about it now. But yeah. I think that's definitely a stylistic thing for him that he carries through.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right saying, like, it's something that we will talk about, and maybe sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, potentially, is like the way that he kind of does it. But I really appreciate that that's his kind of style, and that he just lets things, again, talk about naturalistic sound, he kind of lets things naturally sort of play out with the longer takes and giving us that sort of thing, which I do appreciate. Todd, sorry, you're going to say something there.
No, I was just like going back to like the sort of the violence in that Harfen scene. Like the Harfen's the sort of the climax of it. But again, you're letting that breathe, because it's not just that. Oh, yeah,
I don't know what you did
when you were watching the words I used. It's not just the halfing. It's the fact that they drag him over, they scalp him in front of everybody. Then they shove that thing in his the steak in his mouth and drive that in. Then they half him. There's no sort of time. There's no rush through it, like you say. It's bit after bit after bit, and you have to sit and watch the whole thing and be sort of complicit in that. Which again, I was a fan of, but also people
I think you need to get checked out, Todd. It's getting too much now.
I apologise. I stopped.
I mean, we're obviously talking about kind of the effects and stuff like that. There was a few other big parts that for me stood out in terms of the practical effects that were used. The first one really being Matthew Fox and his loss of hand. Again, the whole I don't know about you guys, but for me certainly the whole thing playing out as natural as possible, as natural as getting your hand chopped off could be. There was no sort of fanfare that this happened. There was no sort of fanfare afterwards. It was like a quick thud. I don't even think you properly see the hand kind of off. It's more like you see the sort of you can tell there's obviously a cut in between his hand and his arm. But it all happened so quickly that it's so visceral. And it looks really, really good, certainly with the practical effects. Collie, what was your thoughts when that happened to Mr. Fox?
Yeah, I think it's so easy to miss that he actually gets his hand chopped off, because it's like a half a second of showing it, of it actually getting lumped off, and then he's obviously holding it and then crawls towards the bush that he settles in, and then have the conversation after it. Yeah, fantastic. And he again, Zahler utilizes this style multiple times throughout this film and all of his other films, that there's these quick cuts to severe violence, or whether it's amputation or anything like that. It's something that he uses, that there are bits that he just has the camera on, whether it's the scalping or anything like that. But yeah, a couple of times he'll utilize the quick cuts of that being happening, or somebody getting shot quickly or anything like that. There'll be the quick kind of shot that it's held on the scene for ages, and then it's a quick cut to that violence, and then it's back to what you're actually seeing. And then it goes to a conversation again in this instance afterwards. I think it's class. And there was actually one or two reviews that I seen before that didn't realize on first viewing that he'd actually had his hand chopped off, because it's so quick. And then he's just holding his hands together, his arms together like that you can only really see the hand that's not chopped off, if that makes sense. He's just covering the stump, so it's not conveyed as clearly as maybe some people wanted to, but if you catch it, then you know that he's kind of fucked,
Yeah, definitely. Todd, thoughts on that sort of scene?
Yeah, there's nothing more I can add, but just on the hand scene, but just in terms of the violence and sort of how it's edited, in terms of the lad who dies in the barn, when he goes check again, that's it. He knows when to utilize quick. Right, this isn't a massive part of us. It's not something that we need to focus on. You see, the arrows just sort of whip, 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 and it's done. Quick cuts.
I said it was an arrow, not a whip.
Shut up.
So this was Lights and Camera Discussion Podcast. The last episode, the last straw.
I joked to Todd yesterday. I was like, I'm quitting this podcast, and any more of that, and I will.
But yeah, there's nothing more I can add. I think you've got it spot on there.
Good stuff. Is there anything else we'll talk about in terms of Craig Zahler, or should we go into kind of the cast sort of side of things? I don't know, Collie, is there anything you want to?
No. I think we've covered kind of the main points of this, which is obviously the ultra violence, and then the utilization of sound and score, which was definitely two talking points that I wanted to talk about this. So no, I'm fine to talk about the performances now moving forward.
Absolutely, good stuff. Okay, so obviously the main guy in the film, or arguably the main guy in the film, is Kurt Russell as the sheriff. I mean, personally, Kurt Russell's he's a legend, isn't he? And for that beard and moustache combo, it just suits him perfectly. But on the back of that, his whole performance, I thought from the outset was absolutely spectacular. Collie, what was your kind of thoughts about Kurt Russell?
I think he's great. I think he's so as Sheriff Hunt. I think he's just charming, but very matter of fact. I think some of my favorite interactions with him are the one with Patrick Wilson O'Dwyer, when he's talking to him about having to leave him behind, but then I get kind of quickly back to the score thing. That's another use of score is the bit when he's left behind, or sorry, not left behind, the bit when he's like fallen behind and he's like trying to catch them up because he's obviously on his crutch or whatever. I thought that was class. But even after they like operate on his leg really quickly, and then it's the three of them away to the caves to find these troglodytes, he continues to leave the stones on the ground for him to follow, and I think that just shows his character and his kind of loyalty to O'Dwyer and his kind of obligation to let O'Dwyer catch them up at some point whenever he feels able, because it's his wife that they're going after. I thought he was great. I thought his interactions with his deputy Chicory, I thought they were very funny. One quote that I did note down was right at the end when he says, "Say goodbye to my wife, I'll say hello to yours." I thought that was just kind of sums him up as a character. He's a very loyal, like dedicated kind of dude, and that's what you'd want from your sheriff, I think, back in these olden times. But Kurt Russell just nails it. He, for a star of his size in a film of this size, against some of the other actors of like lesser renown, I'll say, he doesn't like overtake a scene, but he elevates everybody around him. I feel. I think he was great in this, and it was good to see him in, like you say, with the beard and the moustache and the style. I think like if you could plug him, if you had a time machine back in then and dress like that, and he'd fit right in. I think. I thought he was spot on.
Agreed. Todd?
Yeah, I think it's really nice the introduction that we get with his deputy, with Chicory, where it's like where he gives him the soup, and it's just like a nice little conversation between two mates who work together, and then immediately you see him be the coldest fucking person, where he like that first meeting with Purvis. So it's like that contrast of like, look, he's a lovely guy and he'll do anything for anybody, but don't fuck around with him, because like. But I think their conversations were my, aside from the horror elements, were probably my favourite bit of the film, like where them two just kind of like that relationship built, so that at the end where Kurt Russell's getting sort of tortured pretty much and about to be killed, like when he's saying like we'll get them, we'll avenge them, and like doing what Kurt Russell did for your man who got chopped in half, like I believed it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just sort of like a bit of cheese or whatever. That was their relationship, because it's been built up over. I think there's like 4 or 5 different conversations where you see them build. But yeah, Kurt Russell's class in everything, isn't he? And like you say, I don't know how far between this and The Hateful Eight it was. But to like you say, when he's got that tash and beard, he means business. He's solid in everything he's in.
Yeah, just don't let him hear a priceless guitar when he's in that kind of, that bearded moustache.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I was going to say about it as well. When that whole thing, when he says the boy that's getting going to get bisected, when he says like, we'll come get him, the cavalry's coming, sort of thing, and then when his deputy like obviously dies, and he kind of slinks back into like, yeah, I just had to tell him that, because like if I was dying, that I would want to know that I'm going to be avenged, kind of thing. But he like resigns to the fact that there's not going to be a good conclusion to their story, kind of thing. I thought that was again a show of his character, and that he's protecting people around him, even when he can't, sort of thing.
Even way back when he doesn't want Chicory, his deputy, to come with him. When they're in the bar scene, he's like, "No, I need you to stay here and look after the town or whatever." And he's like, "No, you can't have like a sheriff going away without his deputy." And he almost like just goes fight. He just accepts it, but like obviously in hindsight, he wishes, especially at the end, he probably wishes that he told him not to come with him. But yeah, their relationship was fun. I thought Chicory was great. The bit where Bruder, Matthew Fox's character, is setting out the lines at nighttime with the bells and stuff, and he's like, "Don't you go be breaking the law, like it's me and the sheriff are here," and stuff. I thought that was just funny. He's almost like the Scrappy Doo to Kurt Russell's Scooby Doo kind of thing. I thought at times He's just like standing behind him over his shoulder, going, "Yeah, don't you mess with us," or anything. He was charming. I thought he was good comic relief. I thought at times in a very bleak film. So I know we'll jump onto Richard Jenkins there, but yeah.
Well, no, that's where he shoots the two people that he suspects to be like part of a raiding party and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's like that sort of Mexican standoff between Kurt Russell and Matthew Fox. And he's like, I was trying to get information out of them. He wouldn't tell you the date if he asked. And then he's like, what was it to me about like, I know how to interrogate them. And Richard Jenkins from behind, like he's not even on the screen. He goes, he's got a system. It's fantastic. Like he is just an old bloke who like should have been left behind. But again, he's class in like, you know, when I think about like Cabin in the Woods and Step Brothers and stuff, he's always smaller parts and does a fantastic job.
I think definitely for me, like seeing him in that sort of role or in this sort of film, because I'm kind of used to like his big ones recently have been obviously Step Brothers and your Cabin in the Woods, kind of more comedic, kind of, or well, Step Brothers was obviously, Cabin in the Woods was kind of more leaning towards that sort of way as well. So I think it helps in his performance of being the sort of thing. And Collie saying Scrappy Doo to Scooby Doo, that's perfect. Like that is that is actually.
But the bit that made me think of that is the bit when he's putting out the lines and stuff like that. He's like, don't you be going and breaking the law, and I'm with the sheriff, you know? It's just funny.
I think he's absolutely brilliant. Moving on to kind of like the next sort of character then, we can talk about Brooder, Matthew Fox. Like, personally for me, he was probably my favourite part of the film. I thought he was 100%. Unbelievable. Just from when you first see him as this like almost like stoic kind of like almost like a badass sort of guy. I thought his sort of progression through the film was wonderful. Collie, thoughts on Matthew Fox as Brooder?
I thought he was great. Obviously, the first interactions when he goes to fetch O'Dwyer's wife, but then he kind of branches out a little bit when they're in the bar, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna go. Like, I went to get her. I was part of this to get her involved," kind of thing. And then the interaction with him and that professor guy, because I don't think he had a name. The professor, the kind of the kind of guy that they got in to tell him about the troglodytes and stuff. And he was exactly. So the interaction, he's like, I've killed more Indians than everyone here put together. Oh, that's an ugly boast. He's like, it isn't a boast. And then there's like a big pause. He's like, but a fact. And I was like, this guy is so fucking cool. Like, he's so cool. And then just all throughout, like he keeps like picking away at O'Dwyer, obviously making comments about his wife and stuff, and that's why he ends up fighting with him and hurting his leg more. And it's almost as if, maybe reading too much into it, but he goads him into that to hurt himself because he doesn't want him to come along even further with them, because he knows that it's going to be dangerous and this is a guy with one leg and stuff. So it's almost like a mercy thing, but it just keeps making comments. He's like, and then Dwyer's like, don't talk about my wife like that or whatever. She's my everything. He's like, well, I'm out here risking my life. I'm surely allowed to make a couple of innuendos or whatever. And yeah, I just thought he was funny. The whole time, but just straight to the point, like honorable dude, I think. And then you get that bit of backstory when it's the three of them about, how many Indians you killed. I think he said 116 or something like that. But then it kind of, it wasn't just men, it was women and children too, and because Indians killed his mother and sisters when he was 10, I think he said. Yeah, because that makes an impression on a 10-year-old boy or whatever. So there's like reason why he's like this and reason why he's so driven. He's not just because I think up until that point you thought he was just a hateful guy who just disliked Indians because they weren't white, to put it frankly. Whereas that's a little bit of like not a lore dump in a negative way, but just like a little bit of exposition as to why he's out there and why he is how he is and stuff. And just one more before I pass it on, one more conversation I thought was really funny was he was like, I'm the smartest man here. And Chicky's like, oh, what makes you think that? He's like, well, you're a widower and them two are married, so I never got married and smart men don't get married or something like that. Mm-hmm. I thought that was cool as well. Just like a badass, and a bit of a dick, but quite an honourable guy at heart. I thought that's what he was, a very well-rounded character. I thought he could like kind of fall into cliche at some points, but I think Zahler wrote him really, really well. Sorry, I've went on for too long. Todd, what did you think about him?
No, I like I think the phrase badass is the perfect way to describe him, and I think it kind of goes back to that the need for him in a western. You know, you need that character because as cold is the way I'd use it, like about Kurt Russell about the Sheriff Hunt. It's like when he needs to be, he can be cold, but he's also a very warm character to, you know. Then you've got Chicory, who's, like you say, comedic relief. So you need that kind of like the gunslinger, the typical cowboy type thing, and I love that about him. I think he fits the role really well as well. Like he's a handsome bastard. Like he comes in well dressed and that suave as and yeah. Like I said, I loved the no bullshit from him in that scene where where he thinks the gonna, like, from a raiding party or whatever, that it's like, I've been in this situation before, better two people dead than us three. Fuck it. Like, and I think it needed that sort of, like you said, no nonsense, no bullshit character.
Do you know who he really reminded me of? And I think it kind of clicked to me when I was watching this, because I've seen Jaws twice this month in the cinema, but he's like Quint almost in Jaws. He's that kind of character of like, I've been here, I've done this, like, listen to me kind of thing, but he comes across a bit grating and a bit of a, not a pain in the backside more than anything. I wouldn't say like he's like an antagonist towards the protagonists really, but he's just a bit of a pain in the arse, but he's got good intent at heart, I think.
I thought it was super interesting as well. I don't know, it was something I kind of picked up on as well. It's like he's the only one wearing like proper white. And like, the whole thing with like, if you think about like classic movies, the bad guys in black and the good guys are in white. And it was Kurt Russell was in black and he was in obviously dressed in white. So like, it's that kind of, it's almost like a flip on that, in that Kurt Russell's kind of the more protagonist, I suppose. And he's like kind of more like the anti-hero sort of thing. I thought that was like an interesting choice to have him sort of dressed in white there. Thoughts, Colin? Sorry,
I don't. If that's the point you want to make, then fair enough. But I just didn't. I just thought you just looked cool, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
really
no,
take
it looked
stylistically choices from that, but it was interesting. Timothy Olyphant was supposed to play
really
him at one point, which would have been good because he's a class actor,
Western
obviously.
boy
But
as well.
like Matthew Fox, I've seen him in, what was he in? He was in the Alex Cross movie. He was the baddie in that, and he was terrible. And then he was Jack in Lost. So I've not seen him in too much, but I thought he was really, really good in this.
He was in World War Z.
He was like a random soldier, though. Right?
Yeah, he was meant to have like a big part, but it's like totally cut when they changed everything. And basically, he tells them to get in a helicopter. That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, agreed. The final of the four, then, obviously Patrick Wilson as Arthur, goes through quite a lot in this film. Obviously losing his wife and try to hobble along with his leg. After it was falling off the roof, wasn't it? Like he was like doing something on the roof and he just fell off and hurt his leg. And obviously that kind of plagues him throughout the whole thing. But Todd, what was your thoughts on Patrick Wilson's performance as Arthur?
Yeah, so again, Patrick Wilson's somebody who I rate, who I think just makes silly decisions. I mean, to be fair, if somebody was paying me millions of pounds to star in shit horror films, I'd probably be taking it as well. But
definitely
people pay you nothing to watch shit horror films, Todd. So you know what I mean.
I will defend. What was it? The Night of the Creeps over The Conjuring every day of the week. No, I thought he was fantastic in this. I think he plays that kind of wounded in both literally physically and ego-wise, that he wants to be there, all the way and can't quite keep up. That final, not the final scene, it was like kind of the final maybe half an hour where we follow him, where he's left on his own and the rest are captured, was amazing. With the pistol, it was just him and his gun, and it was, again, your typical Western shit, one man, like with his 6-shooter taking people down. And I thought it just gave him that moment in the spotlight. I think everybody kind of has that time, and that was his. But again, I loved the relationship between him and the sheriff, and just kind of like, him desperate to be part of that, and the sheriff not wanting to leave anybody out, bless him. But yeah, I thought he was excellent. Like I say, he really shows what he can do in this, where other times I think he's sleepwalking.
Just quickly, because I was going to move on to Collie as well. I just want to say, like, I know you're saying there, but obviously his like moment in this in the sunshine as well and stuff kind of thing. But what I really liked about it was like he was fumbling about when he was trying when the guys were coming at him. Like he was trying to like load his shooter and stuff. It wasn't like all clean, like pew, 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 you know, like some westerns can go all over the top and there's like he's like shooting everyone in the head and blah blah blah. But he was like more like fumbling about, like he had the whole movie. But even when they were sort of running at him, through like the brush and stuff like that as well. I was trying to say bush and brush, right? The brush. It's like
I was like, I've not heard this bit of an accent before. What's happening here?
It's an Aberdeen thing, yeah. It's we say brush up here.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Yeah, Collie, thoughts on Patrick Wilson?
Yeah, I thought he was great. I think when you're kind of touching on the fact that he was fumbling about a bit, and that's reflective of how he was throughout the whole film. He just felt real. He just felt like a real dude who, wife being kidnapped, you're not really military trained or anything like that, but you know there's this obligation that you need to go out there and save her. I thought I tried to take down a quote or two from each character, and I thought his best bit was when he was with his wife earlier on in the film, and he's talking to her. And he's like, "Oh, prettier than most cows." And she's like, "Oh, right, okay." And he's like, "But you've never saw Jessica?" Like that interaction, I thought was quite cute because he's just a charming guy. I was just saying there just to cover. He just felt like a real dude who felt this obligation to go after his wife as you would, but no military trainer and that. So he just felt like a real, like run of the mill guy, but not in like a derogatory way, but just like a guy who was going about his business, fell off a roof. He didn't even like hurt his leg in like a cool way, you know. It was just that was probably one of the funnier like revelations was that he just fell off the roof and hurt his leg. You know, I wasn't shot in it, or I wasn't like I didn't take an arrow to the knee or anything like that. You know, that kind of thing. But no, I thought he was great. Like I wouldn't say he stood out very much, but I don't think he was written to stand out very very much. I think his character was kind of pivotal to the narrative device of getting them going because his wife was captured, but I think he was like the lesser of the four like featured, and then he did have his moment at the end to save them, which I thought was really really well done. But no, I thought did exactly what he did. Everyone, I think all four of them, even to some of the background guys earlier on in the film, his wife as well. I thought the whole cast was really really good. It was Peter Sarsgaard was down to play Arthur O'Dwyer, and Jennifer Carpenter obviously was supposed to play his wife at one point, but I think this film took quite a while to get actually made, so there was a bit of chopping and changing of the cast. But Peter Sarsgaard would have been great, I think, as him, but Patrick Wilson did a very good job.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just kind of touched on the rest of the cast. It was interesting to see Sean Young just turn up like and be the mayor's wife for like 2 seconds.
Right, yep.
I like Googled because like, is that Sean Young? Like, I thought that was an interesting little thing. But David Arquette as well, obviously, is Purvis at the start.
Well, Arquette and Sid Haig, as the two guys at the start, I thought was cool.
Yeah,
Fred Melamed, who we'll see obviously in the other two films, is his kind of. Zahler just must have him as who's the guy that Pixar use?
John Ratzenberger.
Yeah, him. That must be like Zahler's equivalent of that. He just pops up for 2 seconds as the barman. Is it the bar? He's the barman in this, is he?
Yeah.
And then obviously the prison guard, and then the bank manager.
Yeah,
it's just like one scene kind of appearances, but I think he's funny. He's really.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered a lot on Bone Tomahawk there, haven't we? I think we've done quite a substantial chat on it. So let's go into kind of what we think letterboxed or ratings wise. Collie, what did you give Bone Tomahawk on Letterboxd?
I've given it a 4. It could easily be a 4.5, to be honest, but yeah, I just went 4.
And Todd?
Yeah, I went 4, and I think the discussion, like just talking about it now, and I'm like, how is that not a higher rating? So yeah, I think a 4.5 would be fair.
It's funny because I'm exactly the same as you guys. I give it a 4 as well. I'm like talking about it. I'm like, why didn't I give us a 4.5? Because like, I there was so much about it that I loved and really enjoyed.
I think if I rewatch it in like 6 months' time, it'll probably be bumped up to a 4.5 because I'll be looking out for the observations that you guys made, like whatever the hell that point was about the black and the white clothing, Massey. I'll be definitely trying to pay attention to that because you put it so cohesively. Yeah. So,
and also the brush as well. You have to look out for that.
Oh, yeah. That's it, definitely.
Okay, let's move on to the next film by Craig Zahler. We're going on to Brawl in Cell Block 99. So, a former boxer turned drug runner lands in a prison battleground after deal gets deadly. Collie, start us off.
That was a good story. I like that. It was good.
Thank you.
Synopsis was good there. Yeah, well done.
I made it myself.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying it was good. Fucking hell. Yeah, I thought this film was fantastic. Like I'd watched it once before because I think skip to the end. I think it was picked on one of the topics way back when by Gemma and Ben. I think some sort of prison fight or maybe just fight scenes. I think they mentioned the fight at the end as one of their favorite ones. Anyway, so I'd watched it then, and then I watched it subsequently a couple of times in the last month or so for this. And I think it just gets better on every rewatch. Seeing Vince Vaughn in this role, that's very much out of his wheelhouse, I would say, but finally utilizes the fact that he's 6'5", very stoic at times. Yeah, I thought he was class. I thought he carried this film is maybe a bit harsh to the supporting cast, but because it's mainly him in every single scene, I thought he did fantastic. I love this film. Todd, what did you think?
Yeah, I'm looking at my Letterboxd rating already and thinking where was I at, because it's a first watch and it was fantastic. Like first thing I wrote down on my notes was first time seeing Vince Vaughn as a legitimate threat considering his size. Like the guy is like a teddy bear, isn't he? He's just lovable in everything he's in. And for him to kind of be this powerhouse who's obviously not a nice guy. I know we'll get into it, but like, or morals are a little bit askew, whatever. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. It had the sort of the violence, but with reason. I see what you mean about it being like a kind of about support and cast being left behind, but I think everything in this film is literally just a sort of tool to progress Vince Vaughn's character. It was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic, and it's one. I think this is the one I was most excited to talk about, maybe because it's a first watch. But yeah, Massey, what are you?
Yeah, again, so this one and Drive Across Concrete are my first watches, and yeah, like I was actually blown away by it. Like, kind of the more it went and the darker it got, sort of thing. I thought it was truly wonderful. I'll use wonderful as in like it's not a wonderful story. It's obviously really dark, really grisly. But it's a great film. It truly is. And I think again, as you guys both touched on there, the using Vince Vaughn's physicality is something that we haven't seen, which is in any other sort of films, which is really strange because he is like a big dude. But seeing him actually using it this time, it felt almost cathartic to actually see him use his kind of physicality on screen, which was great. And seeing the different level, and we'll obviously go and talk about it in more detail, but seeing the different levels that he kind of goes through, he sinks lower and lower, metaphorically and literally as well, was awesome. Was really, really, really good. So thinking about, obviously, we spoke about obviously Craig Zahler's kind of directorial choices and flares and stuff that used in Bone Tomahawk. What was there that kind of stood out for yourself in this one? We'll go Collie first of all.
Very similar, just like very few instances of score or music. One of the music utilizations is when he's in his car, but apart from that, it's just very dialogue driven. I didn't really make this comparison when we were talking about him in Bone Tomahawk because I don't think it's totally valid in that one, but more so in this. His dialogue's very Tarantino-esque, I would say. It's just conversations. It's just conversations after conversations of just stuff. I don't really know how to describe it best because Tarantino just nails it in his films, but they're discussing things such as he has that kind of monologue about the cream and when he goes to the shop, when he's having the discussion after he discovers his wife's cheating on him. If that was in a Tarantino film and it was being said by, Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction or
Tim Roth or something,
somebody like that, it would be, it would be quoted all over the internet. Like it would just be iconic, and the fact that it's said in this film that made like $3 at the box office or whatever by Vince Vaughn maybe means that it will be forgotten. But I genuinely think quality level wise, Zahler's direction is spot on here. The cinematography for like a grimy kind of descent into these levels of the prison, like you touched on, nails it every time because it's kind of blue and a bit clean and sanitary. And the first level gets a bit worse and gets a bit worse. It just, the film gets dingier and dingier as the story progresses along those ways. So from a director standpoint, it's great, and from a screenplay kind of writing aspect, I think his conversations in this are fantastic. Some of the ones that stand out are like Gil when he first goes to Gil's house and he's speaking to his daughter, and even just a line of like, "Oh, he's in the pool room. Oh, is that the one with the pool table or the one with the pool?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, he calls it the billiards room, but all he does is play pool in there or whatever." I think it was something like that. Yeah. Just funny underlying like just one-liner jokes to kind of not leaven the mundanity of the film, like, but just like a little bit of light sprinkling here and there. It was the same in Bone Tomahawk, just like that little bit funny, like comic relief almost. I think was spot on. It just suits the tone of the film really, really well. 100%. Todd, what did you think about Zahler work, like director wise, in this?
Yeah, so what are we, 2.5 hours? I think it is, and like there's with Bone Tomahawk where there's like slow moments. They're used really well in this. The driving I wasn't so keen on. Like, you know, going back to Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's a lot of driving around Hollywood, but it feels like it's setting a scene. It feels like you're living in that part. Where this, it was like, look at the dashboard, now look back at Vince Vaughn's face, and that put me off. But the admission to the prison, I thought was fantastic. Like, that admission to the prison must have been 15 minutes. Like, it took forever, but I just thought it was like that idea of, you know, this slow trudging process that he has to go through, that, you know, he shouldn't be there, he doesn't want to be there, he's trying to be compliant, and it's still an absolute fucking nightmare. I think stuff like the fight scenes were, to not have any music on and to just hear those like fists hitting and stuff. That one in the prison yard, that first sort of big fight scene, where he goes over to the lads who are working out and stuff. There's no shaky cam. There's no kind of trying to like clever camera tricks or anything. It's just, here's the fight, watch it happen. And I thought that was great. The other thing I really like about was the show don't tell stuff. So at no point does he say anything about alcoholism, like about Vince Vaughn's character being an alcoholic. That word isn't used at all. It's just kind of like, are you back on the horse or whatever, or you back off the horse or whatever it is. Like, we know then, I can't remember what they said, there's been some level of addiction in the family. Do you know what I mean? And then like when they're talking about the difference between being addicted to drugs and alcohol, like at no point do they just explicitly, I was an alcoholic, which I'm sure some people will try and do. Like, I thought that was really good as well. Massey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that really stood out to me as well was the use of, like, again, the physicality of Vince Vaughn, but normally seeing it from the back of his head and seeing the tattoo of the big cross. It almost at points felt like a video game, like, you know, like a third-person video game where you see someone, if you're playing GTA or something like that, and you're looking from behind, sort of like that. It kind of felt like that at points. But I love the way that he would normally use that. I don't know, like, I don't know the story much. I feel like I know the story much, but of Dante's Inferno or something like that. It's about like the layers of hell. I kind of like, from my understanding, it's about like some guy that kind of works his way down through hell or something, or torture or something like that. And I wasn't sure if that's like a religious sort of thing with the cross as well. I didn't know if that was sort of the link with things. I don't know. That's kind of. That was sort of going in my head, kind of thing. But I didn't know if that was something that he chose to do. But yeah, certainly the use of the cross a lot was super interesting. I also liked as well, like, he always showed Vince Vaughn as being almost like, even when he was at the top of his game, he was still not 100% at the top. So like, when he starts off after he'd got fired from his job, driving home, and there's the two like Hispanic guys in the lowrider that go past him, and he's in this shitty car, and they're in this like souped up kind of purple bad boy, and he looks over, and kind of sees them sort of. It's almost like he's in between the bottom and what he sees them as being like a better life, or like more affluent than him. And then when the story moves on, he's in the better car. He looks over to like the like the addict on the bus bench. You know, like obviously kind of like having withdrawals and stuff like that. It kind of felt like he was always sandwiched in between at least the bottom and like Gil, who was like his superior kind of thing. That's kind of what I was getting from those sorts of things, that he was always at some point under the boot of someone else, whether it was from not having a job, or under Gil's thing, or even was it Alvarez, the main sort of like villain. Like he obviously
Eleazar.
That's the one. Yeah, sorry, I just used a different name. And so like then he was like under the boot of him, basically, kind of thing. So I always just felt like he could never get to the top of, or like, you know, like,
Do you think he wanted to though? I never got that he wanted to at all.
I think he wanted he obviously wanted a better life. But it just felt to me like he would never get out of that kind of that
Working
sort
for
of
the
cycle.
man.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we all work for the man, kind of thing. But you know what I mean? It just felt like he'd never actually get like that true like freedom or like autonomy that he almost kind of wanted, a comfortable life for his wife and stuff. That's the way that I sort of saw it. I thought it was the way that he was sort of like doing things there. But yeah, I mean, certainly standouts again. The fight scenes, they're like, again, the brutality, like breaking the boy's arm, who wanted him to just do boxing.
As soon as you grabbed that guy's arm,
Yeah.
I was just like, nah, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
I just thought some of those scenes were again total brutal, but like I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was great.
Yeah, I thought like that fight scene, because obviously there's that one, there's the prison yard, and then there's probably the biggest one after that's the final one in the big room where Eleazar and his pals are. And you could tell just in facial expressions and like acceptance is that as he's walking back after he meets with the Placid Man, and they're like, oh, we're going to do stuff to your wife and your unborn child. He's just like processing, because I don't think at any point he comes across as like stupid. I think he's a very smart guy. Bradley is not Bradley, which I thought was a cool thing throughout the film. He corrected like everybody. No, it's Bradley, not Brad. So he's a very smart guy and a very proud guy, but he's calculating like, how do I get to this prison? How do I get to this prison that I need to get to? And unfortunately for that guard, it's just him. But I don't think at any point during that he didn't beat him to a pulp or anything like that. He did like the minimum he had to obviously like go above and beyond just beating him up a little bit. Like he had to do something extreme, and he resolved that to be breaking the guy's arm, which wasn't very fair really, because the guy was a boxer and stuff. But he didn't like get on top of him and just like pummel his head in or whatever. And that, like, I thought that was at least him showing restraint. Almost is a weird word to use in that instance, but he decapitates a guy later on. He punches a guy in the back of the neck and breaks his neck and kills him. He like curb stomps a guy. You know, he's got that within him to do that, but he knew that guard didn't deserve death, essentially. And the only guard that he did kill was the guy when he squished his head in the door. And even then, he's just like, oh, well, that was his fault, not mine, kind of thing, because he tried to escape from the cell. So I think he did have a respect somewhat for the prison system, because he has that conversation with the policeman before he's actually in prison, when they're having, and he's just like, oh, the policeman said something like, this, you could have easily been in this chair or something like that, but you chose the wrong path. And then he's discussing with him, like, how many American flags do you have in your house? Oh, I've actually got 2. So he connects with like law enforcement in that way, but obviously he goes about his business doing illegal stuff because he wants to earn this money. So I think he's a smart guy, very much so, and just has this obviously massive physique that he can do the business when he needs to. And even I'm just trying to think of all the calculated sequences. You even see that when he's actually doing the drug run with the 2 Eleazar's men. And he sits back a little bit while they're fighting with the police and stuff, and he's like, you can see him thinking like, how do I resolve this? And then obviously he resolves it by killing one of them, or like shooting one of them, and then he gets killed by the police, and then he clashes with the other guy and stuff. I thought that was a really interesting scene to show his dynamic, is that he wants to get money for his wife, so he has to do bad stuff to an extent, but he won't allow innocent people to get hurt, because he doesn't even hurt the blackguard at the end in the bad prison, because he's not been bad to him really. It's only that little shit dude with a small man syndrome kind of thing. That's the guard that he's got the issue with, so that's why he lays into him a little bit. So he does have respect to only hurt the people that deserve to be hurt, kind of thing. So I think that's a combination of Vaughn's like performance, but also Zahler's writing. I think he writes people very, very well. Like not anti-heroes, but just this kind of, he's in the vein of like Tony Soprano, Walter White, like the kind of the era of TV of the last, maybe the early 2000s to maybe the mid 2010s. These kind of anti-heroes were being shown at the forefront of television, and it's kind of crept into films a little bit. And this is a really good example of, you sympathize with the guy, but you know he's a bad guy kind of thing, and he'll do bad stuff.
Definitely. Todd, I think you covered stuff, didn't you, Todd? Or...
well, we just like, I think we've just naturally moved on to Vince Vaughn. And I think that the whole thing about him being a bad guy, like immediately he's a piece of shit. He's got morals, they're misaligned in some places, but the fact that he like tears a car to pieces in the first sort of 10 minutes of the film, you're like, right, well, this guy's obviously like, he's not going to go in and beat his wife. Like, that's something we know, because let's be like, we've seen what he's capable of, we know what he can do, but he's still like, that's still abusive, that's still him being to tear a car to pieces or whatever, still ridiculous. And I don't know, the cross on the back of his head to me suggests some level of like, I don't know if it's like, what's it, like white supremacy or something like that. It might just be a Christian tattoo, but the fact that it's on the back of his head suggests to me it's not. But yeah, I just think he plays it so well, and I think that the idea, Collie, that you were saying about him being calculated, like that, we've seen so many revenge films, and it is a revenge film technically, where everybody acts on impulse, everybody acts on emotion, and he doesn't. He acts on what has to happen at that time. And I thought that was brilliant. I think he's, like you say, you've got something new. I'm still expecting him to sort of like bust out into the sort of Wedding Crashers Vince Vaughn every time I see him. I want that from him. I love that of him, and I think to see something a little bit different is excellent.
Definitely. Should we talk about the rest of the cast then? I think
I just want to touch on the white supremacy thing, because it's a Zahler thing in general, is that a lot of people seem to have construed quite a lot of his screenplays as either right wing or a little bit kind of conservative, or that kind of racist vibe. I'll just throw the racist word in there, but I didn't read that at all from Vince Vaughn's character, because when Gil is talking about the N word, and he's like, oh, what way can I say it? And he's just like, you can't say that anyway without it being bad or whatever. Yep. And then I think when he's talking to your man at the table in the like the second prison, before they had the prison yard fight, he's sitting at the table talking to the guy about who's who and stuff. And he's like, I'm going to go use that weights kind of thing. So then he says the line about red, white, and burrito. And I read that to be, he says that to have inflammatory language. Reaction.
Yeah,
I don't think that's Zahler writing it like that or anything like that. Like there's characters within his films that are absolutely racist. Like we'll see that in the next film, but that's not. I don't feel that that's him trying to push forward his sort of agenda or his policy, like his political views or anything like that. And I think that Vince Vaughn is kind of a reflection of that, of Zahler in a way, in terms of he's saying stuff to be inflammatory and show people like how people are and could be construed or whatever. So I didn't take. I thought it was just a Christian kind of conservative American thing, because I tied that back to having the multiple American flags in his house. Like you see him when he's in his new house, he's got it sitting outside on the yard. So I like it's. I think that's quite an easy comparison or kind of easy thing to think of. Is you see Vince Vaughn, who you normally don't see with a skinhead. He's got a skinhead, massive tattoo, like cross on the back of his head. Quite easy to think that he is just some sort of white supremacist, but I think it's just a means to an end. No, like a means to an end thing when he's using that conversation.
The red, white,
and I think the fact that he doesn't even touch the black security guard or the guard at the end is he doesn't really care what color this is Vince Vaughn or Bradley, like he doesn't care anything about you like that. He's just like, you're in the way of me saving my wife and unborn child. It doesn't particularly matter. And the correction, or kind of not the correction, but the judgment of Gil's language, which is when he calls the water the F word. And he's just like, I didn't realize water had like a sexual orientation. And then when he says the N-word stuff, and he's just like, I don't think you can use that anyway without it being bad. I think that showed a moral compass for me in terms of like, he doesn't stand for that language. He's not going to like stand there and like correct him or whatever and say, oh, you can't say that. But just the nature of the world that he lives in, folk are like that. But Bradley's more of a kind of, I don't particularly care. This is I need money. So I'm going to deal drugs, and I need to save my wife. So I don't care really what I have to do and to whom.
Yep.
A lot of how he speaks and stuff. And again, this might be just me. Like, I've made this decision that the tattoo on the back of his head is like white supremacy or whatever. That like it also sounds like maybe a reformed language, like as in,
possibly.
Like he's been through those changes, and now he's like, look, that's not how you. I don't read reviews, and like when we share stuff, I don't watch it or anything just because I think it'll sort of shade my judgment. But do like to read through Letterboxd, and there are people who talk about like it being right wing or pushing an agenda, and I don't see it. Like I'm not. Do you know what I mean? I'm not with that. I just thought there's something to Bradley that is where he has been a piece of shit, or or there are leans.
I think the reformed point might actually be something that's something there. I'll maybe look out for that next time. Like the language that he's using and the way that he's correcting it. I was just reading it as that's just not the person he is or whatever, but he might have been like taught it, if that makes sense, or like you say, like reformed. No, it's a good point.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Shall we talk about the sort of rest? The cast is kind of like, it's definitely a Vince Vaughn's film. But there's obviously there is obviously supporting cast as we kind of go through things. Now, obviously, the first one that would kind of be, or the first real sort of like character that we meet is his wife Lauren, played by Jennifer Carpenter, and we learn about her infidelity. So, what was your thoughts on sort of her performance then, as kind of the almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, that led him down this sort of path. College, what start us about Jennifer Carpenter?
No, I think I'd want to hear your thoughts, because what do you mean by the straw that broke the camel's back?
Well,
I want to see how you read that to be.
The way that I saw it was that obviously he lost his job, is like a sort of what's the word, like legitimate sort of job, and then came home to find that that she'd been obviously having an affair with someone I think with someone at work, wasn't it? And that then the fact that it was almost like a sort of like metaphor for how his life had sort of gone to shit, and like everything was kind of going wrong. His wife was sleeping with someone else, and he just lost his job. So that was when he decided to turn back to doing his drug running to make sure that he had a better life and didn't have to worry about the things, because there was the whole thing about how she thought that his sort of like distance from her was maybe because she was falling out of love or whatever, but it was actually because he was working harder, working more shifts to get them money to try and get them out of that situation. So he almost not took a shortcut, but then decided to then take the kind of almost the path of least resistance, but obviously more illegal kind of thing. So that was like the sort of like the turning point, the kind of the nexus point, if you were talking about Marvel, that made him go down that sort of path of the rest of the story. Essentially, that was my kind of thing about the straw that broke the camel's back.
And how did Jennifer Carpenter play his wife? How did you feel her performance was?
She was good. No,
Fucking hell.
no, I did.
Like that's like there's other podcasts that I've listened to with movies, and it's just like I've not got really much to say, and I'm like, well, what the fuck are we reviewing it for then?
No, I did. I really liked her performance in that. She also went through a load of shit as well. Obviously from the start, kind of her sort of trying to rationalize what she was doing about discussing the whole point that he that she thought he'd gone distant, and then obviously later on in the film when things were going good and they had a nice life, and they had a nice house, nice car. She was pregnant obviously as well, something that they'd tried before and not been able to do, and
Miscarried.
Yeah, miscarried. Yeah, and seeing like her sort of journey through being captured, and the whole thing about being about the Korean guy wanting to like do the abortion on her and stuff as well. I thought that was disgusting, and she was really good in like the. It kind of was damsel in distress, I suppose, but I thought that there was more to it than just being like, the sort of. The stereotypical sort of thing when she was on screen, because again there wasn't a lot of time she was on screen, but when she was, like, I fully believed that, you know, she was going through hell as well as he was. The conversation she was having with him on the phone as well, when she, like, right at the skipping to the end kind of thing, when he was discussing that he probably wouldn't see her again, and the sort of you could tell she was kind of relieved that she'd got away from the Korean doctor and the Placid Man, I think his name was, wasn't it? But then also being told that she wasn't going to be seeing him again. I thought her performance was really good. Again, not too much to work with, but when she did, I thought she was a really good kind of counter to kind of Vince Vaughn's sort of his character as well. So yeah, I thought her performance was really good. I thought she was she did really well. Collie?
Yeah, I thought she was great. I'd only really seen her in Dexter before as his kind of motor-mouthed, foul-mouthed sister in that. But no, I thought she was great. The conversation, obviously, when she's initially caught cheating, she's already in the house after when he's outside beating up the car, she's like already trying to pack things away. So when he comes back in, she's like, "Oh, I'm away. And I'll just leave," or whatever, and then they have this kind of discussion about why it happened and how it happened, and then they reconcile and start working together as a couple, and you obviously see that shortly thereafter when they've got this. It's 18 months later, I think they said.
Yeah.
It's like an 18-month jump, so they've got this nice house. She's pregnant. Life seems to be going well, and then they have the conversations about, "Oh, I'll come up and see you at the prison as much as I can," and he's like, "No." And she's very accepting of that, and she's very supportive of it. It's him that's going through it, and it's him that's put himself out there in order for them to have a good life. So she's complicit in that. So she's not really. You don't really convey sympathy for her because she's reaped the benefits of his lifestyle. But one point I thought was really good that she makes in one of the conversations is like she's like, "Oh, I'll wait for you this time," because he's obviously worried that she's just going to cheat again on him. So she's very supportive of him and says to him, "You know, I'll do this and this." And the little badass moment at the end when she says to Gil, "Hand me the gun," and she shoots the doctor, I thought that was really, really cool. And yeah, it's such an interesting performance by her with the last phone call that you touched on, because it's like I couldn't tell if she knew that she'd never see him again and she was just playing along for his kind of, you know, to make him at peace or whatever, or if she was being a bit ignorant. I kind of feel that she knew, because she let him obviously speak to the baby, and she was really emphasizing, kind of similar to the conversations that the sheriff and Chicory were having in Bone Tomahawk, just like, what would you want to hear if you were never going to hear these people talk again? And she was saying all the right things. So I thought it was a class performance, just kind of understated, but that's because it was Vince Vaughn's film and she was just a supporting character. But everything that she needed to do, and especially that first conversation I feel like they had in the house at the start of the film, I thought she did really, really well. Todd, anything to add on Carpenter's performance? Any standouts?
Yeah, I just think she was well written. I think she could have very easily just been like a wallflower plot device to kind of, right, this is why Vince Vaughn's in prison because he wants a better life for her, and this is why he's doing what he's doing. But, you know, I believe and I like Jennifer Carpenter. Like, I've not seen Dexter, so I've only ever really seen her in like Exorcism of Emily Rose and Quarantine and stuff, like more horror sort of things. She was also in White Chicks, and she was fantastic in that. But a very different role to this. But yeah, she like I said, she could have just been sort of like you said, a damsel in distress. Chuck her in, she's there, and we were just back to Vince Vaughn. But like, you wanted to know what was happening to her on the outside. You wanted, I cared if she was all right because of the character, not just because I wanted Vince Vaughn to succeed type thing, or you know, it was about her as much as anything else. But I think you've covered it spot on. Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously a couple of people that I kind of want to touch on. Don Johnson as the warden, the badass warden. I loved him. I thought he was great. You know, pure authority, and you know, he runs that prison with an iron fist. Sometimes more than he should, you know, with like the torture like devices and stuff. Obviously the thing that he puts on Vince Vaughn and uses the switch to control. I'm assuming that was like, I don't know if that actually kind of explained exactly what it was, but I'm assuming it was like kind of some sort of like sonic device that kind of.
It's an electric shock. He puts rubber. He puts the rubber of his shoes at the back of it so he doesn't get shocked.
Right. Okay. I didn't catch that, to be honest. I thought it was like some sort of just like I don't know. I thought it was like sonic device or something. But yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, like his whole wall of like kind of like this like torture rack essentially that he had, I thought was quite funny. Not funny obviously, but just like seeing that in like a prison was like, it was such a weird sort of like you know, prisons meant to be about reform and all that sort of thing. This guy had no reason to reform these folk. He wanted them to like suffer, which I thought was an interesting sort of thing. I mean, you guys have any thoughts on Don Johnson and his performance as warden? Todd?
It was just a cigar. It was nothing encompassed that dickhead of a character more than him just like sparking up these cigars every sort of like every scene he was in. He just plays a dickhead so well. Like it's just it comes so naturally. I think he's got that sort of he's southern, like that sort of not charm. That's not what he's got at all in this film. But like, there's a charisma about him, and charisma is probably a better word than charm, because he owns the screen when he's on there. And even though you've got Vince Vaughn, who's what is he, 6'5", 6'6", something, 6'5", like you've got this towering bloke, and Don Johnson's not a big guy, but you still feel like he has every bit of power. And obviously, literally, he does because he's the warden. Yeah, I thought he was brilliant. One of the notes I wrote down was just Don Johnson, good dickhead, and that's the only way I could.
Was that?
I need to be careful. There's no space in between that word. He was great. He was great. Collie, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, so it's like just to specify, it was like cigarillos or cigarillos that he was smoking. It wasn't even like big stogies. Oh. So it was like the thin ones, and I thought that was just even cooler than a big Arnie stogie or whatever. I thought that was cool. Yeah. And then when he's waiting at the gate at the end, when Vince Vaughn's like behind the door, and he says, "Oh, I've got I think Vaughn asks, or Bradley asks him, "Oh, have you got a cigar to smoke?" Or whatever, I've got a cigarillo and I'll smoke that, and it shouldn't take me too long or whatever. So yeah, it's just that hanging out of the mouth is totally cool. One of the main obviously the main conversation that they have probably together is the one outside the prison when he first arrives, and he just tells the guy to dump out his stuff, and the guy just like lets everything fall out his arms onto the ground, and then like immediately after that, when they're in the prison, he's getting like checked in or whatever. Bradley's like, "Oh, what about all my stuff in my ring?" And he's like, "I'll look tomorrow," or he says something like so like flippantly to him. Like charm and charisma, I would say that he is, because he does have that in his performance, because he is a little bit of the comedic relief, even though he's like a proper bastard. I think some of the stuff is intensely funny, the way that he acts and stuff towards him, even though you're rooting for Bradley at this point. But no, I thought he was great. I thought it was like it's one of those like I can't imagine any. I don't know if anybody else was going to be cast as that, but I can't imagine anybody else playing it as well as he did there. I thought he was spot on.
Yep, agreed. Another one that stood out for me was Fred Melamed again as the sort of like the guy that books him into the prison. Again, it's just like the sort of flexing of the little power that he has, making him go to the back of the queue when he's somewhat insubordinate to him. I thought his and his use of language as well is very as Craig Zahler. You were talking about how his dialogue that he writes is kind of like almost like got a bit of flair to it. And I think Fred Melamed, the way he talks, just completely complements that dialogue completely. Thoughts on him, guys? Was there anything that stood out for you with him?
I mean, Todd already talked on like how long that scene was.
Yeah.
And even like when you first hear him talking to the guy at the front, like when you first arrive at the scene, and he's just like back of the line, you're like, Bradley's 100% going to be getting sent to the back of the line. So you're just wondering how it's going to happen. It's obviously to do with this receipt of the ring being over $75 or whatever it was. But no, he was good. And it's just when he came back, he was like, oh, that was a lot better that time. Because it wasn't even as if like, because he hands it over, and that's not the issue, is that he's arguing about it. It's how loudly he shuts the drawer. And there's just that half a second, Bradley's like, I didn't mean to. And he's just like, take your stuff back in the line. I thought it was class. I thought it was really, really funny.
Mm-hmm. Todd?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it just set the expectations for the prison. Like, it was real. It was something that, again, without going, it's the show don't tell. We expect you to be.
We're gonna have to get a bingo card of you saying that, by the way. Make sure
I say constantly.
Show don't tell, baby.
I'm obsessed with it.
Get some merch. Just show don't tell.
Show don't tell.
Get them a massage just with and like and stuff like that over every sentence. And yours is the show don't tell. Mine's could just be shut up, Massey.
Just the face.
Yeah.
No, like I love that it wasn't like a set of rules. It wasn't like what film? Oh, it's in Bronson, which is a film I love. But it's like where he goes, "We're lion tamers here. We expect X, Y, and Z." And he sort of reads the rules out. Like there's none of that here. It's just you see, without being told, what's expected of him right the way through the prison.
It's so another like comedic bit of it is when he comes across the two guards and they're like making him drop his trousers and stuff, and they all just go A-, and then the other one just nods in the background or whatever he does, and then later on when he's going in between, I think it's when he's talking to, is it when he's talking to the Placid Man? I can't remember. And they're just discussing his height, obviously, and they're like 6'4", and then it goes 6'5", or whatever, just as he walks past that other time. So just little conversation between the guards. I think it's just that little bit of extra dialogue that Zahler chucks in that I feel is very Tarantino-esque, of just a little bit of world building, a little bit of funny lines here and there. I think he's just makes his screenplays really ones that I really, really enjoy.
Definitely. Just kind of, I know we've sort of spoke about this quite a bit, and we've probably covered a lot of it, but I just want to touch on obviously some of the kills. The face drag, that for me is absolutely brutal, and is just, you don't expect it because he's already kind of killed him, and then he just, with no effort whatsoever, slides his body along with just his head. Like that for me, I audibly gasped for that.
That's why. And when he kicks him over, you can hear the guy breathing still because he's not dead.
Yeah.
Savage. So savage.
Crazy. I'm glad they showed us that and didn't just tell us about that. Any other sort of kills or again practical effects that you guys really enjoyed from this?
So there's one effect that I want to touch on that I seen some people criticize, and I think we touched on it a little bit about how it looks fake sometimes, and the bit when he gets shot in the head right at the end and it cuts to quite obviously a dummy or whatever. I think that's completely intentional. I don't know if you guys thought it, but I thought that was completely intentional. It wasn't supposed to look realistic. It wasn't supposed to look like Vince Vaughn, and I'm not really attuned or like versed in them, but it's that kind of grindhouse exploitation type films that this is apparently in the genre of. Again, I'm not really, I don't really know too much about it, but you see loads of reviews comparing it, and I think that's definitely an aesthetic choice, like harken back to the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s when films like this were maybe starting to get made or maybe were influenced from wherever. So I thought that was like a really cool effect. I didn't I didn't think he was going for realism or that, and people that think that he was are maybe perhaps misunderstanding it, or maybe looking for a bit more, top class, like, CGI or whatever. But that's just not what the film was about. So I thought that was one effect that I thought was quite funny.
Yeah,
like when you see it, you're like, oh, that's obviously fake, but like in a deliberate way.
I completely agree. It's like, have you ever seen Scanners? With the famous like head explosion. It's like that as well, where it looks totally fake, but it's so effective as well. And I think that was a brilliant effect. Like, it doesn't have to be. I think people are too sort of focused on making sure that movies are exactly real and stuff like that, and or like look as real as possible. But I think sometimes you just need that kind of like almost campy kind of obvious sort of bits and pieces that filmmakers use to add a bit of character to it. That's the best.
On the other hand, some of the effects that he uses, like with the arm break and stuff like that looks legit. So like, I don't know if people are like, oh well, the rest of it looked so good, why did that look so fake? I can kind of get it like that, but I just thought it was just a funny effect at the end, because they didn't have to even show it. Like, they could have just showed him being shot and then that would have been it. But the fact that they showed him fucking exploding and stuff like that, it's quite funny.
Definitely.
It made me laugh just because it reminded me of Toby's head going in Threat Level Midnight a little bit, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But like, I think if people are whinging about it in terms of like it looks, go back to his previous film where you've watched somebody literally get scalped and split in half and how real that looks, and what he's not going to be able to do that in where he's got more of a budget, where he's, do you know what I mean? Like, I assume more of a budget, like further down the. Like it just the point is it's in the style of the film, and it adds that little bit to the end. I thought it was class. There's we'll come to Dragged Across Concrete. There's a bit that I didn't like in terms of the effects, because it does look fake, but it's part of it. For me that curb stomp is like, I don't really like wince physically. I physically recoiled at that. That was brutal. But I think it's his commitment again to practical, to physical, and I think it adds so much more to it, because I don't know, I wasn't expecting it in this one.
So some of the line delivery of Bradley, I think, just to touch on the back of the kills, is when he's beheading Eleazar in the thing, and he's like, oh, they say that the head lives on for a little bit. And then he stamps, and obviously, like, that's when his head gets cut off or whatever. And he's like, I hope so, or I'd like to think so, or whatever. I thought that was great. And then some of the other quotes that he got was when he was asked, oh, how are you after he got let go of his job? South of okay, north of cancer. I thought it was class.
Brilliant.
And then one other one that made me burst out laughing was when the guard was asking him, do you box? And he goes, no. And then what is it? They're muscles just for show, and then he goes, helps me lift stuff. I thought that was just fucking class. Like, just not only the writing by Zahler, but just the delivery and the deadpanness of Vaughn as Bradley, I thought was spot on.
I feel like his comedy chops have to help with that, like the delivery.
100%, yeah. Like, it's the same as like Batista, his Drax, like his comedic delivery and Guardians, and that's spot on. And you don't know if that's just. But on the back of like some of the campier stuff and the sillier stuff that he did in WWE, that's where he got drawn from. So Vince Vaughn, having been 20 plus years or whatever in comedy before this, is definitely utilized some of that delivery practice that he's had.
Definitely. Okay, anything else we'll talk about with Brawl and Cellblock 99? I think we've covered the whole thing.
Yeah, spot on for me. Yeah, good
stuff. Perfect. Okay, so in terms of our letterbox ratings, then, Todd, we'll go to you first. What did you give it?
Regrettably, a 4. It's not a 4.5 on another rewatch. It's a 4.5 film. I will amend that.
Collie?
That's 4.5 for me.
Todd, I'm exactly the same as you. I'm like in the same way, Bone Tomahawk, I'll give it a 4, and I'm like, why have I given this a 4? Like, talking about it again, it's a 4.5 film. It genuinely is. Even potential for like a 5-star. It's one of those.
I think so. Yeah. I think it would be a 5 for me over time. I think.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think I'll watch it again, and I don't like going back and changing ratings. So I think I'll watch it again and give it a 4.5 spoiler for for that there. Okie doke. Let's move on to the final film in S. Craig Zahler's filmography. We have Dragged Across Concrete. So once 2 overzealous cops get suspended from the force, they must delve into the criminal underworld to get their proper compensation. First thoughts on this film, Collie, take us away.
I really enjoyed this film. I think I first watched it. I think it was getting really promoted by Netflix. When it got added there, it was on like the top banner and stuff. And I seen, S. Craig Zahler, Mel Gibson, Vince Vaughn. Like, I'll give that a go. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. The one real criticism I would say of it is that it's probably about 20 minutes too long, half an hour too long. But apart from that, I think it's very much in the similar style of his films that we've already discussed. So yeah, I really like this. I like the two lead performances. I like the ensemble cast. Yeah, that's my thoughts. Todd, what did you think?
Yeah, so it's a first watch for me, and I don't know if it's a film that I'll ever want to revisit. Like, I've watched it twice in prep for this. I agree it's too long, and I feel like when I was sort of getting ready for this, I noted down 52 minutes in, and I was just like, there's nothing that really stood out that really sort of like that gripped me. The performances are great, and there's some brilliant scenes, especially towards the end. There was some of it that really annoyed me as well, that we'll, I'm sure we'll get into. It's not a patch on the previous two, and maybe that's another issue is, with the other two being so good, have I gone in with such too high expectations? I don't know. Massey?
Yeah, I'm with you guys in terms of it too long, and it's so funny you say 52 minutes. I've literally got a note saying 55 minutes in, for fuck's sake. Like, it's a film for me. It's a film of two halves. It takes a long time to get going. Once it gets going, I think it's fantastic. But the first half for me just dragged so much. I was at points where I was like, I'm gonna have to stop and revisit this at another point because I'm just struggling so much. But I mean, the second half, we'll also get into it, but like the bank bit, that just from there on, it just absolutely kicks on, and I thoroughly enjoyed the second half of the film. Okay, so this is, I think this is probably where we can kind of get into a bit more. I mean, the other two have kind of really waxed lyrical about, and I know Cole obviously said that you've like totally really enjoyed this and stuff as well, but I think this is one of the ones where for me personally, the more slow, meditative, longer takes are the one are maybe for the worst for it, or maybe detract away from the film a little bit for me. Things like the long stakeout when Vince Vaughn's eating a sandwich for like 40 minutes, you just see him like pouring salt and eating a sandwich. It's a bit excessive for me. It kind of slows the film down to a bit of a halt. But Collie, what did you think of things of this film then, with that sort of thing in mind in terms of the filmmaking and stuff there?
As good as Gibson and Vaughn were as the two cops, I thought Henry, Tory Kittles' Henry was the standout for me. I thought his journey was really interesting. Like, immediately you're kind of shown that he's a bit of a dick because he comes home, obviously, and discovers that his mum's selling sex, obviously, for money and he immediately, his demeanor almost changes when he knocks on the door, because he hears his mum at it, and then he knocks on the door, and then she immediately says, "Oh, go away," thinking it's his little brother. And then for him, he's just like absolutely shocked, like not shocked at that perhaps, but just like angered by that. So he's just like, get out there now. So immediately like shown as like a takes no shit kind of character. And then Michael J. White obviously gets him out. I think that's the first scene actually is when he's with the lady. I think that's the initial bit. Sorry, I think I maybe got them the other way around. But Michael J. White and his dynamic's really good, but he obviously needs to make some income now that he's out of prison, and immediately just goes to armed robbery, essentially. So I think he's the most fascinating character. I wouldn't say that like Richmond and Lorenzetti, Vaughn and Gibson are like cliches, but you've seen cop films like that before when they've kind of skirted outside the realms of what they're allowed to do and be. So I was kind of a little bit more interested in Henry's story, which I think differentiated it, which I think that's what bumped up a little bit to being just another bleak, cop goes rogue and steals money or whatever kind of thing this film could be. I think the added element of Henry, and that story arc, I guess, is what elevated it a little bit for me. So that's what the standout for me was. We can obviously cover a bit of Gibson and Vaughn's performances a bit more, but I wanted to start with Henry and Kittles as Henry. What was your thoughts on him, Massey?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a different, unique story within this sort of buddy cop story, essentially, which, again, I thought you see like sort of glimpses of his morality in the film, which really stood out for me, especially when they're driving from the bank heist, but when they're all painted up as white guards, like that, like the makeup and stuff there was pretty funny for me to see that. But yeah, I thought whenever his morality showed, it was really interesting, especially at the end with him and Mel Gibson once things have kind of gone down. And again, obviously we'll get into it, but he still was going to, split things with Mel Gibson, and I thought that, yeah, you're absolutely right. His sort of arc and his sort of story was such an interesting part in what potentially could have been another sort of like paint by numbers sort of like buddy cop, or a bit more, not buddy cop because it wasn't exactly hilarious, but a sort of normal sort of buddy cop kind of thing. Yeah, I thought he was a very good addition to the film. Todd, thoughts on him?
Yeah, I was rooting for him, and I don't know whether it was his character itself, like in terms of who he was and how he dealt with things, whether it was because of his little brother, which I thought was a nice touch. It wasn't. It didn't feel forced. The sort of like, I'm doing this for my brother type thing. I liked some of the dialogue as well. That what was it about that when he's knocking on the door and he's like, that's a baseball bat and I'm going to be practicing home runs on his skull type thing. Like, I just thought, like, again, really well written character, and then making him take the bins out as well was a lovely little touch. Like, but yeah, like you can see that this is somebody who's like he's had a bad do. Like, and he's, maybe not being a good person necessarily, but he wants to do right by his family. He sent his mum money and stuff. Wants to look after his little brother, and I think, yeah, I was rooting for him the whole way through, and just kind of not wanting him to be a dickhead, not wanting him to be the bad guy type thing. Yeah, he was excellent, and like you say, I think him and Michael J. White together were fantastic. Again, nice to see Michael J. White like with that little bit of comedy, because what was it? Black Dynamite is like the thing that I know him best for. And when he swallows that key and he's like, in your mum's ass or something, and then he's like,
check your mum's rectum.
Check your mum's right, yeah, and then ask the proctologist. I thought like those little bits were brilliant. Just showed that they weren't necessarily with the psychopaths, all the way through. Yeah, I thought they were excellent.
Yeah, and the kind of the full circle thing for Henry was he obviously did by his word and sent some of the bullion to Gibson's wife and daughter, which he didn't have to, but he obviously did. So he did have that kind of good morals at the end of the day.
I think for me, because they kind of dragged that part on a little bit, where it was like, oh shit, has he actually like given her anything? Because they're still in the shitty apartment while he's playing this shotgun safari with his brother in the massive mansion and stuff, and you sort of for a minute you think, nah, he's not done it, but then obviously when right at the end when she gets the box of gold, I think that's like, again, as you say, it just shows how he stood by his word and did that, which I think was a nice kind of touch to end the film on. Yeah, so shall we talk about then Gibson and Vaughn as the two sort of the main guys in the film, I would say. For me personally, the sort of opening that we meet them with the Hispanic guy in his apartment, and they're like out on the, what's it called, fire escape, isn't it? Yeah. I thought that whole sequence, again, it's like so long. Like you see Vince walking up the stairs with the coffees, and there's like it's a lot longer than it needs to be. Which in before, maybe that's absolutely fine in other films, kind of where maybe didn't work sometimes in this film, but I thought that whole sequence and the introduction to them was great. I really enjoyed that. I thought, again, it set out their morals as well, in that they were obviously cops, but manipulated the lady that was in the apartment with the guy. You know, even had her like out, like be vulnerable, get her to stand out the shower, and she was like topless and stuff as well. And then obviously again going back on their word when, you know, she said that they said that if she told her, if she told them where the things were, they would let her go, kind of thing, and they still didn't. That again, it just set out exactly what their sort of viewpoint on things was. I thought that was a really good introduction to them too. But what did you guys think of Gibson and Vaughn? Todd, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I think part of it that maybe slowed it down even more was, like you said, Collie, before, we've seen it before. Like, I don't think there was anything spectacularly different or new. I thought they did well. I thought they did fine, but in terms of like Vince Vaughn in Cell Block 99 was an outstanding performance. Where it just felt like, not, I don't want to say paint by numbers. I don't want to say that because I feel like it's harsh, but it feels like things we've seen before. I like the chemistry between them. But it's nothing that I haven't seen that I wouldn't expect from, especially Mel Gibson. Like, I feel like it was not sleepwalking. It wasn't like a poor performance. I just think it was good. There was a nice little bit. I think him and Henry driving together and that conversation between them was really nice. And little things like when he's at home and he's talking about his daughter. And he's like, oh, she's got two cop DNA type thing. Like, you know, she's going to be tougher than most at her age. Like, those slower, softer moments were quite nice and quite well performed. But yeah, they didn't, like you say, Henry was more of a standout in this. I thought they were good. I didn't think it was anything to particularly write home about. Collie?
I thought Gibson was great. Even though he's played maybe a similar character before, I thought he was class. He was quite upfront about what his morals were. The conversations that when they're watching, when they're in the car at night and stuff, and he's like, "We have the skills and the right to acquire proper compensation." So he's laying it out to Vaughn why he wants to do it, and he wants money, he needs money. So their interactions I thought were pretty good. As good as Vince Vaughn was in Brawl, I thought he kind of slipped a little bit back into the kind of sympathetic loser role that he plays in some of his comedies. And that, I think, the conversation where he's in the jewelry store with the jeweler, and the guy's like, "Oh, we can get you on a payment plan." He's like, "No, it's just like, I don't know if I'm going to have a good life for her being a cop and stuff." That kind of, it wasn't like a parody of his comedy characters, but I thought, I've seen Vince Vaughn do that before, kind of thing. Whereas like Mel Gibson, yeah, we've seen him do what he was doing before, but I thought he was excellent in this. Kind of taking point on it, but he was also constantly saying to Vaughn's character, you know, don't do this if you don't want to do it. He gave him multiple times, I thought, to get out, and Vaughn was like, "No, I'm with you." So I don't really feel there was any pressure between partners for Vaughn to tag along. He wanted to do it for the reason of being that he wanted to get money, obviously, to allow his girlfriend and hopefully, you know, his hopes that fiance a better life. But I think she was really well off, so I think he was misunderstanding their relationship a little bit. But I thought they were both good. I for me, kind of the flip to you, maybe Todd. I preferred Gibson a little bit to Vaughn. Vaughn slipped a little bit for me. From like great to good, like from a career standout performance in Brawl to this, I think was a quite a fair step down. Whereas Gibson, I think, carried him a little bit almost, which is harsh to say maybe, but that's how I read it.
I think Gibson's performance, there was a lot of, again, this is kind of, I'm assuming more of the writing, but there was a lot of things that he would say that felt kind of like he was like a noir, a film noir detective. Like he would say stuff like crud and like stuff like that. And it was
Some of that
really
was quite
weird.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was the same sort of-
Anchovies.
yeah,
He
it
said
was.
anchovies multiple times. I think it was Vaughn that said anchovies, was it?
Oh, it might have been actually. Yeah,
Yeah, but the both of them though, they would say stuff like that. Definitely.
yeah.
Funny.
It was like super weird. Like again, it felt like a kind of like nod to that sort of thing, but it just felt kind of out of place for what they were doing, and like the cadence that they said it, it just seemed so strange that we had like this sort of like ultra violence or mostly ultra violence, and they wouldn't say like shit or fuck.
Yeah.
It would be like crud. I just thought that was like an interesting sort of
The whole
pick that
dynamic
they
of the
had.
percentages, the couple of times that they were
Yeah.
saying like percentages. So I think it's Vaughn says to Gibson at one point, he's like 50% does not evaluate anything in a yes or no question, because it's obviously it's just 50-50. So he's even calling Gibson out in his methods and stuff. So like the banter, the kind of the conversations between them were great. The sandwich eating was quite funny, I thought. Like it did go on too long, but Gibson like visibly getting like more and more annoyed at him eating the sandwich. I thought that was great. Again, maybe it wasn't needed, but
Yeah.
I didn't get upset by it. I thought it was just a bit funny.
I think maybe when it was happening, I was in the mood of like being like, oh come on, like we're this far in and like nothing's happened, and then obviously this happens, and it's like, come on, just do something to move the story on a little bit.
Maybe I'm giving Zahler a bit too much credit, but I thought that was just to kind of convey the time or the lengths at which they were going to like observe and stuff. So this was just like cop films or films in general. If people are doing stakeouts, it just so happens to be that you're watching the scene that the guy like walks out the building or whatever. Whereas this is just what happens on stakeouts. If you were to watch the whole 12 hours that they're sitting there, is that they'll sit and they'll eat sandwiches noisily and annoy their partner or all that kind of stuff. I thought it was just more of, again, maybe giving him a bit too much credit, and it was maybe a bit self-indulgent, which seems to be a trend in quite a lot of our podcasts, is that the third film, the director disappears up their own bum a little bit, and perhaps this is Zahler's version of that for you both, but I thought that was just him giving his kind of opinion of passage of time.
I think that's a fair point, to be honest. Like, it just didn't really do it for me personally. But I think the fact that they were showing instead of telling us about the stakeouts and how long they can be.
It was half as long for me because I was watching it at twice the speed.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
maybe that's what it was.
Sorry,
That was only 10 minutes of sandwich eating, whereas in fact it was 20 minutes.
I think it's like what Massey said about like with Cell Block, you've got like the stuff happening. So
yes,
that slow, like it's like you're in a hectic life, and then this slow, methodical thing happens. It's fine. Well, when you're like you say 45 minutes in and nothing's happened, and then we're getting more of essentially nothing. Like I think that's where it hits harder. And again,
yeah, totally. And I think that's a Zahler thing, is that every single one of his films is just a slow, methodical, like you say, march towards the culmination of it. And this, I think, maybe is slower for the first half, maybe 2 acts than the other 2 films. But then the third act is like, not a sprint. I don't think it was rushed, but it picks up the pace a lot faster than the other ones. Whereas the other ones, it's this happens. Whereas this is like, not much is happening, then lots happens. So yeah, I think it's maybe just a little bit of a change of pacing for him, and maybe for you, and for me, it's not as effective.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. So, shall we talk about kind of when the film sort of starts to move forward a bit then, where the sort of the story does get a bit faster paced and things. We obviously meet Jennifer Carpenter, waiting for a bus and then not getting on, and like her sort of whole character. Again, I thought it was so well done. We find out that she obviously used she obviously was off. She was pregnant, had a kid, and used all her holidays to be with that kid, and has become obviously so attached and like socially anxious to actually have to leave the child with its father and go back to work and stuff. And then obviously when things kind of pick up with there. But before kind of jumping into the sort of thing that happens with her, again, I thought with her turning up halfway through and knowing what she'd done in other films, I was expecting her to be in for the rest of the sort of film. So it was a bit of a shock when what happened to her happened. But what do you guys think of her?
You can say what happened. I mean, people have like either watched the film or not watched the film. They're watching it for spoilers. You could say what happened.
I just don't want to jump too far into the sort of feature, but like, okay, yeah. So she obviously at the bank heist, she gets slaughtered. Her I thought it was a really effective twist that she'd come back she'd managed to like get through her demons, battled her demons of almost like agoraphobia, wasn't it? Is that what's called? Agoraphobia? Where you like don't want to leave the house.
Can't go outside, yeah.
And she managed to drag herself into work, and they'd set up this whole thing for her new baby, and it was almost a celebration for her. And in the background we see the robbers come in and execute their heist and effectively execute her when she tries to stop her like workmate from alerting the cops. Again, I thought it was a wonderful, I'm saying wonderful, but it's not nice, it's horrible, but it was a great effective piece of filmmaking. What did you guys think of obviously her turning up and the twist? I mean, obviously, was this your rewatch for yourself, Collie, wasn't it, that you kind of knew it was coming up? Did you? Or
yeah, like I'd watched this a couple of years ago, whenever it came out. I think it came out 2019, was it? Something like that. Anyway,
18.
It came out a couple of years. Yeah, so I'd seen it before, but I hadn't rewatched it since. So I did know that something was happening. I just didn't remember explicitly what happened. So it was a little bit of a oh yeah shit like when that happened. So one of the criticisms of this film, reading reviews and stuff, is that why is Jennifer Carpenter? Why is there this kind of side strand of the story of her developing as a? Why is it not just like they rock up to the bank and then they shoot an employee? So that's one of the. I personally think it's great. I think the allowance for development of a character, even if it's for 20 minutes or whatever, is really, really good. I think outside of the actual film, but as the watcher of the film, similar to you, I was just like, oh shit, like she must be adding another strand to this already multi-strand story. You know, you've got obviously the two detectives, Henry and Biscuit, and then you've also got Vogelman as the robber. So I was like, oh, here comes another strand, and then for it to be so short-lived is shocking. And I think Zahler is playing on the fact that he's hired an actress that he's previously worked with. Have you seen his previous work, or just like an actress that you would recognize for a small part role, not obviously of the same scale, but it's similar to Drew Barrymore in the original Scream kind of aspect of, oh, here she comes, she's going to be in it, she's going to be the star or whatever, and then obviously dies swiftly, similar to this. So I thought she was great. I thought, shout out Fred Melamed again as our bank manager. I thought he was hilarious. Like his language in the bank was so funny. And yeah, like and I can at least understand people's criticisms of the Kelly's her name, the Jennifer Carpenter, like stranding or holding up the booty and stuff. It's a bit cliche, I would say, but it wasn't like eye-rolling cliche for me, but I could understand why people perhaps read it that way, like oh my baby, and then I don't know if this is the effect you're going to talk about, Todd, but the effect when she gets shot and then it cuts away to like quite obviously a doll and she explodes, similar to Bradley at the end of Brawl. Like again, I didn't it was quite obviously fake or silly or whatever, or over the top, but I thought it played into the kind of type of films that Zahler makes. So yeah, I thought in what she needed to do, I thought it was actually the peak of her performance in this was probably higher than our peak in Brawl. In Brawl, she did like a solid job, but that conversation between her and her partner at the door with the baby, I thought was class. Like I thought she was really good. The emotion was there. I thought the dialogue was obviously really well written, but her performance of it, you immediately sympathize with this character, and you've known her for all of 3 minutes or whatever at this point. I thought that was really, really well done. Todd, what did you think on Jennifer Carpenter and then obviously the bank sequence?
Yeah. So it was the hand. It wasn't the head, because again, I was there for the head. I enjoyed like it was the hand getting shot off, and it splits in half, and that was the bit that sort of took me out of it a little bit when she gets shot in the hand. I loved the bit at the door. I thought she was fantastic. The rest of it I fucking hated. I'm one of those people, and I'm very sorry, but not because I felt cheated. I was all right with her dying. It was how the only phrase I can use is emotionally manipulative. It was like, I feel like,
Aren't all movies emotionally
yeah.
manipulative though, Todd?
but in the most ham-fisted way. Like, it was like the boot thing that pissed me off, and then in retrospect, the way that your bank manager talks to her, that then pissed me off, because I was like,
Well, I'm not going to have Fred Melamed getting slaughtered
agree.
here, right?
I agree.
like, his delivery was fantastic, but like, how did I not know something was going to happen? How did I not know she was going to die? Like, it just felt like it was like, he is a character. Like, let's add more to the bank heist. Watching somebody get shot in the, like, getting a hand taken off and then getting a head blown to pieces should be shocking enough. I didn't need it, and I think it kind of, it almost felt like it did her dirty a little bit, in that, like, she's so good. And I'm not talking about previous roles or anything. I'm talking about that door scene. I believed every bit of it. You know, it just, I was in for the film after 50 odd minutes of not being up for it, and then being like, right, here we go, and then I don't know, it just took me straight back out of it. It really sort of it rubbed me up the wrong way a little bit, and I think it was because it was such a sort of like a twist of the screw type thing. It's just, that's not the phrase. I can't think of the phrase. What's the twist of the knife?
Yeah.
It made it worse. I was trying.
Twist of the screw. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Note that one
Well,
down.
to be fair,
yeah.
it depends what you're screwing in, because you could be screwing into something bad.
There you go. See, yeah, it wasn't that. I'm just agreeing. I'm going with it. Yes. No, it wasn't. It didn't work for me.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
and-
So, like I said, there is people out there like that, and you've construed it that way, which is absolutely fine.
You're wrong, though. No.
You're wrong about some films, long legs, but apart from that, like,
Mark the time down. How long into the episode?
158.
There we go.
Fair enough. Right, okay, so then obviously from the bank heist kind of going forward, this is where I personally thought it, well, again, from the bank, I thought it picked up from there, and we're kind of moving on to like the sort of final kind of shootout, isn't it? That's sort of the next kind of big thing, I would say, from that. I totally loved that. I thought it was a great, it was like a proper standoff, you know, when there was obviously a little twist of them letting the hostage crawl over to them, and obviously ended up shooting Vince Vaughn. Like, did it hit his head? I can't know. It hit his like chest, didn't it? And then
chest.
yeah. And then him finally getting to listen to the voicemail that his fiance or his hopeful fiance left him, and stuff that we don't ever hear, but we know the content of it from what he says. I thought that whole sequence was absolutely incredible and was so tense, which the rest of the film didn't have that level of suspense until then. I thought it was brilliantly made. Collie, what was your kind of thoughts on the sort of the third act?
So it was perfectly tense, but the bit after he listens to the phone message and Vince Vaughn's like, Mel Gibson's like smashing the phone and stuff like that. He smashed the phone for ages. I was like, it's done. Like, stop it. It's just like, that little bit like was like a little bit like too long, but not in like a bad way. But it just went on that little bit, and it made me laugh. And it makes me laugh every time, even after like a really sad bit. But no, I thought like in terms of, because all the action in Zahler's films, it's not like, you know, high octane explosives, like camera cuts, like drone shots, all that. It's really like real is a good way of putting it. So from when they arrive at the garage to then Henry realizing like where they are and what they're going to do, and the whole kind of splitting of them, him and Biscuit from the three guys in the van, I thought was really, really well done. And we've kind of touched on it already. The whole check your mother's rectum kind of last stand thing by Biscuit, I thought was really good. The gory bit with him in the back of the van cutting him open, and these guys, you don't really get any context to these guys. It's like black gloves and grey gloves is what they're down in the cast list as, but they're obviously like fucking psychos, like really, really psycho, because they know how to cut somebody open and like not burst whatever sack it was and all that kind of shit. Like they're obviously like way off the kind of what's the word, like way off the kind of grid in terms of their morals and what they'll go to get money and stuff. Led by this Vogelman person who we've not really spoken about, but he's like sick, like in terms of just an interesting kind of enigma character, even though he's pure evil. So all that, and then the kind of sequence of Gibson and Vaughn rocking up, and then all those kind of big snipers out, which I thought was pretty cool as well. The hark back to the run flat tires or the airless tires that we had the conversation of earlier on was pretty cool. So it was a massive payoff, I thought, for all the kind of the strands of the story that we'd had throughout up until that point. I thought it was really, really good. It was a good resolution. And then again, talked on it earlier, but the Gibson and Kittles, or the kind of Ridgman and Henry stuff after the fact, when they're going to split the money and discussing all that, to then Ridgman just kind of, you could read it as his prejudices getting ahead of him in terms of like, he just think, oh, this kid's going to just screw me over because that's what he'll do and stuff like that. So then it ends up costing him his life, you know. I thought that was a kind of good, like not in a good, like, yeah, a good culmination, a good representation of kind of you're getting your just desserts or your reward for how you are as a person. That's how Ridgman should have went out, really, because he was a bit of a bad guy, bit of a corrupt cop and stuff like that. So that's always going to happen to him. So I thought Zahler really, really nailed the ending of this. I thought that he landed it pretty well. Todd, what about you? Or were you just completely out of it after the bank sequence?
I checked it. No, I was back in.
I'm not like joking about that. I'm just saying that you said that, so I was like, did they manage to get you back on side for the last little bit?
Yeah, like it was a proper shootout, and I think for me it was the case of like, it's not going. I know there are bits where like we see inside the van, then we see like Gibson and Vaughn, but like it wasn't constantly between like, right, let's go back to the van. Now it's stuck with the characters, and to use the phrase that you used before, Collie, like it let them breathe a little bit. It let that sort of, it didn't lose any of the tension. We still want to know. So like when the hostage came out of the van, you know, you didn't know what was going to happen. I was not in a million years expecting her. I thought it was like a kind of bargaining chip type thing rather than for her to shoot Vince Vaughn. I thought that was brilliant. I thought the whole thing was really well done. I was a bit put off by the it's a little bit earlier, but her needing to piss, and like the brutality in every film that Zahler's done so far, including like the cutting the stomach open and stuff, and like felt warranted. Like, how dark, sorry, just to go back to Cell Block 99, how dark is it to threaten to cut off the limbs of an unborn? Like, that's twisted, but it mattered and it worked. I thought that took me out of it as well, was like the way that they treat that lass when she needed the toilet and like go and clean it up, and that was weird. But yeah, apart from that, I thought it was really well done. Like you say, I thought it was a really good conclusion for Henry, and kind of that, getting that soft moment after high tension. Yeah, it was really, really well done, and really stuck the landing. Massey?
Yeah, I can't really add much more. I like I say, I think it was two halves of a film. You know how you say like football's a game of two halves. That's what this felt like as a film. It was a film of two halves. Like the second half for me, like, was great. I think it really, really did stick the land, and I call it like absolutely nail in the head or screw in the head. When you said about that it was a representation of Gibson's almost prejudice as well, that kind of led to what actually ended up happening to him. He assumed that he was going to get screwed over by Henry. I thought that was a really powerful way to show that, you know, sometimes people just can't get past what they think they know. I thought it was a really powerful, interesting way to show it. And again, you know, it was a nice ending. It was a good ending. The fact that kind of everyone got, well, essentially everyone got what they wanted, or well, Henry got what he wanted, and managed to give the money to Gibson's family, which I thought was, as I said, it was kind of one of those where for a second you're like, they're still in the shitty apartment. He hasn't done what he said he's going to do, so maybe Gibson was right, but then we find out that he ended up actually doing it. And I think as well, did he not? I don't know if he said it was from Mel Gibson's character, but Gibson's wife assumed it was from him, so he almost got like a good send off in their eyes as well, sort of thing, which I thought was a nice sort of way to wrap things up. And the song as well, Shotgun Safari, was great. I used it in also the trailer. I think that was Zahler, wasn't it, that he did all the music again for this, and it was kind of like it was like a 70s sort of song, which I thought was
him and the boy Harriet did the music for all three films.
Yeah. I thought it was a fantastic song, absolute bop. But yeah, definitely second half was spot on. Anything else we want to talk about, or should we go into our ratings?
No, I think we covered it for me.
Yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot of it. Okay, look. So, Collie, what did you rate Driving Across Concrete?
I gave it 4 out of 5.
Todd?
I put it as a 2.5 initially and bumped it up to a 3. So, 3 stars.
Fair enough. I did 3.5. I don't think that changes much, but yeah, I did 3.5. So we were kind of all, well, it was like a progression, was it? Todd 3, me 3.5, Collie 4. Yeah. So that's fair enough. Absolutely fair. Okie doke. So I'm thinking we're probably going to be round about the same in terms of our rankings for S. Craig Zahler films, but 1, 2, and 3. What was our thoughts, Collie?
Brawl, Bone Tomahawk, and then Dragged Across Concrete.
Todd?
Yeah. Surprised myself actually, but yeah, I'm the same.
I think I went into it thinking Bone, Brawl, then Dragged Across, but I've flipped Brawl and Bone Tomahawk, so we're all on the same page for once. I like it. Wow. Okay, look. Well, before we wrap up, was there anything else that you guys wanted to say or cover or anything? Happy enough with that all? Yeah.
I think I was just going to touch on one thing, that he's apparently doing a film coming out with Adrian Brody and Vince Vaughn called The Bookie and the Bruiser. Don't know much more about that, but he does have an upcoming film. When that'll come out or whatever. That was just earlier on this year that it got confirmed. So looking forward to that.
Definitely. I think that's one of the good things about this podcast as well, is like we discuss directors in such kind of like detail and stuff as well, that when they've got a new film on the horizon, I feel excited because I want to go and see how it pairs up with the filmography that we already discussed, sort of thing. So that'll be interesting to see. Okay, doke. So let's just kind of confirm who our next director will be. So our next director we're discussing on the Lights Camera Discussion podcast will be Mr. Jeff Nichols, brother of Lucero's own Ben Nichols. I wonder whose choice this was. I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about Lucero for, well, this has been 2 hours, so we can do 4 hours on Lucero, basically. Yeah, that sounds good to me. But that will be the next episode will be on Mr. Jeff Nichols. We'll get everything up on the socials and stuff. So again, if you are listening on Spotify, remember to follow, give us a 5-star rating as well, because we are a 5-star podcast in the top. Was it the top 1% of podcasts in the world, wasn't it? If you're watching on YouTube, of course, remember to subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and ring the bell for notifications as well. And if you're wanting to follow us on Twitter or X, at LCD_pod, and you will see us on there. But thank you so much for listening, everyone. Guys, thank you so much for sitting down and discussing this here. I had a great time. I look forward to the next episode, as you can very well imagine. But guys, thank you very much for watching, listening, and we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Cheers, everyone.
See you in a bit.